Hello and welcome to Stampscaping 101. I was asked recently if I could stamp out the Aurora Borealis curtains. I have two different northern lights. Aurora Borealis is one's called curtains and one's called rays. This one is the curtains one. And it's a stamp of this size. It's roughly 3 by 4.5 inches, okay? And this one's the same size down below. But in this simple composition right here of two stamps, because they asked me to stamp the Aurora Borealis curtains and give a demonstration of it specifically, I'm stamping this on a size of card that's typically larger than the ones that are in most of these videos, just because I wanted to really showcase that image, okay? Now this is a really fun process as far as utilizing different tones of inks and sponging them in. So if you kind of enjoy that process, it becomes almost like a painterly process of layering tones into a card. It's all, it can become like a painting, in fact, when you have a lot of area that you can fill in and allow you to apply a lot of coverage, okay? Now, in this card right here, this version of the Aurora Borealis, I show you, if you watch this video, this book with some photographs of northern lights, and one of the things that I've done in past versions of my Aurora Borealis scenes is I typically go with kind of a more monochromatic approach. So there might be a green one or a purple one or a blue one or something like that, but in a lot of them I've seen this kind of color combination of greens and purples or greens and magentas, so I thought I'd want to try that here. And I like how it turned out. I thought it was really fun. But one of the things I do, and I'll kind of explain this all throughout the process, is I have this neutral foundation of blue, because blue relates to purple and blue relates to green, okay? But I don't necessarily have the two of them over one another, so I don't have the green right next to the purple, all right? So I have this neutral foundation of blues running through here, and that kind of separates them, and it makes it a little bit more of a graceful transition going from one tone into the next. But anyways, that was a lot of fun there, and I used so much ink right over here on the perimeter that it felt like, almost like if you've ever worked with alcohol inks and taken like a blender pen or something like that, and how you can kind of move those colors around. There's so much of a buildup of dye-based ink on this card that I was able to kind of really move the colors around. You can see a lot of textures in here just from kind of the spreading of the ink. See where it gets kind of thicker like that? And that's through the use of a lot of color, a lot of ink, okay, that's been laid down. And that's one of the things that I like about the glossy cardstock, not only the impressions that you can make in terms of the crisp impressions as far as highly detailed imagery, but also the way it holds the ink, and it can hold the ink on the surface really well. And something like an area like this right here, after I spray it too, it should look even more vibrant and rich. When I do like an art seal or a crystal clear over it or something like that. I don't know. That should be fun. But anyways, I had a great deal of fun on this, and this scene is really about, the sky above anything. But one of the things I kind of point out in this video is try to retain some of the light areas of your objects underneath it, and that will give a little bit more variation to kind of the secondary objects within your scene. And if you watch my last video, I talk about adding some little details to really kind of bring out some added visual interest and textures, and that's where that white gel pen really comes into play. And then on some of these little highlight stars that I've done, I add some of my pigment ink, just with a little dry Q-tip application of it, so we get these little kind of glowing stars working in there. But I think those little stars add a lot. I think it added a lot of depth within the scene. To me, that Aurora Borealis, you know, the Northern Lights, looks like it's closer to us, which it would be, than those stars in the background. So all of those things kind of add up, you know. This is a very simple composition, you know, in terms of its structure, using just 2 stamps. But we can really add a lot of depth through the use of those little touches like that, you know, that can add make all the difference. Same thing within here, adding shadows and little detailed marks on whatever imagery you've chose to use. So, anyways, I hope you enjoy the scene, and thanks for watching. Okay, let's see if we can't stamp a Aurora Borealis out, Northern Lights. This is a book. I used to spend so much time in bookstores. It was kind of like a hobby. And I liked looking through all kinds of books on nature and art and whatnot, but this is one of the books that I had happened to pick up at one time. I've never seen Northern Lights in person, but always fascinated with sky imagery and, you know, these really interesting, you know, events in the form of Northern Lights, and I don't know, I always thought they were really dramatic and would look great in scenic stamping. Something like this is something that I use for kind of a reference as far as like color schemes and things like that. This is a pretty old book now, so there's a lot more, there's a lot better photography these days with digital imaging. You know, all of this photography was taken on film, so it's a little bit grainy, but you know, we can get a really good idea of some different color schemes we can work with. I mean, look how beautiful this one is right here with these deep saturated blues here, but I always like this type of tone in terms of the kind of an emerald green look. But I think what I'm going to try for, I was looking at some different imagery on the internet today, and let me see if I can find it. There's one in here somewhere, and it was kind of going into greens. Here it is, right here. This kind of green magenta looking color scheme. You can see where the magenta is right here, and the greens are in a different location, but we have this kind of foundation of blue. It's kind of, you know, kind of a navy blue. You can see all the way around. So, I have a couple different Northern Lights images. This one, I think they call it something like curtains or something like that, that style. And then there's also these other ones like this one. I think this one they call rays. Just in general, you know. A lot of you will know a lot more about it than I do. But what I have here is I'm using the unmounted version. It also comes in a wood-mounted version. And what I'll do is I'll put those Northern Lights curtains above this stamp right here, which is Tall Peak. Okay, we'll kind of give it a little bit of a foundation. You could always do just sky, but you know, I like to anchor my kind of celestial imagery down with some sort of land element. It could just be foreground or something like that, or a branch. But anyways, this is like a mountain peak, and then we'll have these curtains coming from behind it, okay? Now, in one of my recent videos, I was talking about maybe getting into some different formats here. This is just like a remnant of a 6x6 and a smaller piece of paper, but this longer one will give me a little bit of added height, so I can add a couple images down. I can always do it on a smaller scene as well, like something like, you know, your standard quarter page like this, you know, and that would be fine, but I thought, well, I haven't worked in kind of a longer one in a while, and this will be a fairly simple composition in terms of the layout of it, so I'll go long and large with it, okay? But like I said, it'll fit on a quarter page card just fine, or a 4x6 or something like that. Okay, so what I want to do is grab a fairly large acrylic block here if you're using an unmounted stamp. This could be a stamp along too. If it's a stamp along, grab your stamp, and what we're going to do is we'll ink up kind of a medium to darker tone blue. If it's something like a Memento, you can go with a Danube blue. Just go for any kind of navy blue, probably. You can go for a kind of a medium blue too if you want to, but the darker blue will stand up against a lot of tones that we're going to run into this imagery, okay? Now, this image, as far as the Aurora Borealis curtains, it's fairly light, and I'll show you what it looks like when I stamp it out. Okay, so if this is going to be my mountain down here, I'm going to put this Aurora curtains right about like so. You can do it at an angle too. I mean, you saw that book just now. You know, there's all kinds of different looks out there as far as different types of visuals that you can do. And that's what makes these so much fun, too. It's not like a moon or something like that, you know, as far as a static object. Okay, now see, that's the Aurora curtains. Now it's defined by a lot of tone around it, and it's fairly delicate tone, all right? So that's why I generally suggest to stamp out delicate tone sky objects in a dark color, because it's light to begin with, you know, it's just, you know, the space in between the dots is fairly wide, as opposed to something like this. This is tonal too. You know, you can see those dots are more condensed, okay? So, I mean, if I was to stamp this out, even though it represents light, you have to define the lighter areas with the area around it, meaning make it dark, okay? Now, I can go for a couple more impressions of this if I want to, all right? You can build it up, you can stamp another one here and another one here, re-ink in between impressions, but I'm just going to leave it like that, all right? Very easy. All right, let's stamp our, I'm wondering if I want to stamp out this mountain right now. I guess I will. I don't want it to smear when I start blending in a lot of colors, and I'm going to blend in a lot of colors over the top of this one. Over the top of, you know, the curtains. But let's just add this in here so we can see what we're doing, okay? This is like one of those types of images, you know, as curtains where you can, you know, almost do the entire sky behind it, then, you know, later on you can kind of stamp this mountain in there. I think I might have double stamped that mountain just now. I kind of laid it down and picked it up a little bit, and we'll see what happened. Well, that's fine. A little bit of blurring, double stamping right there, but that is not going to matter. Now I have that mountain going up into those that image, and that's fine. I mean, you could have had this down below, you know, coming from much farther behind this image, and that would be fine too. Okay. So no masking needed, all right? Okay, so this is a simple composition. Now, there's a little bit of space around the bottom of this mountain, and I could take that portion and stamp it over here and this one over here. if I wanted to, but I'm not going to really bother with that. I have a feeling that that area down there is going to get fairly dark, so I'm not going to worry about that area as far as it being filled in, okay? Alright, now let's get some clean stylus tips here. I didn't wash these ones off from the last scene that I did, so this one looks green. It is green. It stays fairly damp on these for a while. If that's green, I'm just going to keep that one on here for when I start blending in some of that green. Alright, but here's the thing. Going for kind of this dual tone green and magenta looking glow, green, purple. Blue is the neutral color between those two hues. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to work through some blue tones first, okay? Could be something like this as well, memento. Alright. Anything. Light, medium, dark, okay? So if you have some light, medium, and dark blues, grab the lightest one that you have. There's a distress ink called, I think it's Tumbled Glass, that one. That'd be a good starting one. Anything light, okay? Alright. Now, here's the thing. We have these, here's the thing that's particular to this image, okay? We have this area that's light like that, okay? And it's kind of, you know, coming out. I mean, it ends right here, so I'm going to try to continue this idea of light coming out, okay? Like that. So this this summer sky is so light. I don't know if you can even see it. What I'm doing here, I am adding some ink. Here, let me do it. Let me add. Let me just take this re-inker. If you have like a light blue and then you have a re-inker fluid for it. Now this one happens to be the seashells or Adirondack lights blue. This just allows me to take a big puddle of ink right here, you know, and spread it faster. Because this is going to get a good amount of coverage, okay? Yeah, here we go. See that? Alright, so see I'm going in the direction of those, those rays, okay? And I'm just generally staying kind of in the spirit of that kind of that direction, that motion of the light, okay? You see like here a little bit. I mean, this is just with the first color, so it's not a big commitment to that color by any means. We're going to go all the way to like black on this, so this is just kind of getting things established, okay? And then we're going to come in with like green, and hopefully it's nice and dramatic looking, purple, and maybe magenta or something. Alright, now I'm going to stay away from that mountain a little bit right now, because it is a little bit wet, okay? But you can see I've left a little bit of that light coming up here. You know, I'll retain more of that, or I'll define more of that light, kind of with some darker tones, okay? So see? Just don't tone everything out. Everyone always, you know, the ones that think this is really hard is because they tone everything out, you know? But it's not hard to, you know, to define light. You just don't color everything. So imagine this had an outline right here, you know, as opposed to just being open Just don't color in between that. So you just have to kind of figure out where it is. If it was a moon, that was a nice round area. You know what I mean? That's kind of easy to work around. You can kind of see it. But it just means to, you know, just take things in a nice gradual method. And you won't get any kind of unforeseen, kind of unexpected marks, unintentional marks, I should say. Okay, now this is a Salvia Blue, and this ink is light as well, fairly light, so it's not a big jump in value going from one color to the next. Now where do you put this? You just kind of put it in the same area that you just put your previous color. Now, because I put down a lot of that first color with the re-inker, this is really kind of blending nice and gracefully for me, okay? See that? I mean, I can go like this if I want to, right? But because I put down so much of that other color, look at it, it just blends away really nice, okay? But be careful and retain that lighter area that you've kind of defined with your first color. And there's no kind of precarious you know, mark or process that's happening here. It's very easy, okay? Don't try to tone everything out, just work one little area at a time, okay? And just working around here. Always kind of starting on the outside of the card and then working your way in. That way you don't get, you know, something like that there. But if you get that there, just blend it out. It gets a little bit more, you know, kind of, I wouldn't say precarious, but you just have to be a little more careful when you get to the darker tones. But if you don't rush to the darker tones, okay, if you spend more time with the lighter ones like this, it makes those darker tones much easier to apply. Okay, so that's kind of my secret, you know, even if a scene gets kind of dark, you know, with the end result, it's really more about the lighter tones, because you can see the lighter tones get a, you know, you get a lot of coverage from them. The darker tones typically are kind of more on the perimeter of the your card. Okay. By the way, that was the Salvia Blue. Now I'm working on the Caribbean Blue. If you don't have, you know, Caribbean Blue or something like that, it's, you know, this is kind of, it's almost a little bit of a kind of a pale turquoise looking color to me. Go to medium blue, you know, go to like a Bahama Blue, or if you have pads from whatever company, just kind of lay them out and see which ones go, you know, as far as your progression. Start light and work darker. Now here's the thing too, what I like doing is I like using the side of this brush as well. It's not a brush, a sponge, okay, like that. See that? It's a little bit heavier, and then I kind of whisk it up like that, okay? That's my motion. See how that kind of tapers off like that? That's all I'm doing right here. See, it's getting a little bit darker on the perimeter. And it's lighter in the middle because I'm going wet, okay, and dry it like that. See that? Just turn your card. And as you can see, I mean, I can still see that big block of imagery in the middle. And I think that's sometimes, I'm not talking about someone that's been doing this for a while, but if you're a beginner and you're doing some kind of image like this, a scene like this, a lot of times people, this bothers them, see right here, this block right here, so they feel anxious and they want to get rid of it, so they kind of color it away, you know, with you know, a really dark tone, and then that's where it gets a little bit more precarious because they're going too dark too fast. So the end result isn't as rich in terms of the color glow because undercolors aren't in there yet. And the marks with like a really dark tone, a really dark color, kind of might look like something like this, right in the middle of here, okay? So just work it through the lighter tones, and don't, you know, don't worry about your kind of end result too early on, okay? Okay. A lot of times for me, everything kind of starts coming together. By the time I get at least to the colors that I stamped out my imagery in, or black, you know, whichever one came first, you know, sometimes the imagery like this, you can stamp this out in black, but then you definitely have to get to black, you know, in order for it to kind of start blending in visually, okay? And quite often you have to go darker, because, see, I'm streaking in this blue, and it is getting darker. It's kind of getting, blending in that edge of that Aurora Borealis, but the page is fairly wet right now, so ink isn't applying very quickly, but that's also a good thing because it blends in. If it doesn't blend in so fast, it really gives you time to kind of play around with it and move it around. And one of the things you can do too, if you want to kind of just expedite the process, before you stamp out this Aurora Borealis, just kind of blot off the edges so that it kind of tapers off and it's kind of lighter on the perimeter area just to begin with. Okay, so it stamps out lighter on the edges. But see, this blue, now I'm on kind of a navy blue, right? It's the Marvy number 3. This is getting dark, but this is really where it starts kind of coming together for me in terms of the lighting of the scene. But even though you might tone out a lot of that, the lighter tones of blue underneath, the lighter tones of blue are making the end result much more saturated and rich. Okay, because those colors underneath will always affect what you see above it, you know, layered on top of it, I should say. Because these colors are transparent. I think there's a movie out there on Northern Lights. It might have even been an IMAX movie, but I think this one guy developed this gigantic fisheye lens, you know, and he would go out and photograph, you know, these Northern Lights, and he would do it under time-lapse photography, all kinds of different looks, and it was really amazing, you know, watching that, those lights kind of, I don't know, they call it dance, you know, almost, up in the sky. Okay. Let's go in here a little bit more, like that. Kind of going in, if I'm going in this area in here, real close to the light, the lightest area. With one of my darker tones, like this blue here, what I'm being careful about is I'm just using this kind of in a drier incarnation. See that right there, how dry it is? You know? Okay. Alright. We have kind of our foundation here. I haven't forgotten my mountain down here, but I'm going to let that set up a little bit more. Now, what I'm going to do is start off with some additional colors, okay? Let's make this part up here the purple one area, and I'll make this over here kind of that greenish glow, okay? So, this is where a lot more of the fun begins. Pear tart. Do I want to use that one? A little bit of that pear tart's a little bit kind of earthy, or is it? Oh, I was thinking about the. I think I might have been thinking about the. I don't know. I have that distressing green somewhere. Let's go with kind of a light green. If you have something like that, that would be fine too. Let's try this one. This one's called yellow green. Alright, I am going to switch tips here because that'll confuse people if you have a yellow green. There's a little bit of green, residual green in that from the last scene that I used that tip on, but let's go for this. It's a kind of a yellowish green, okay? And I'll add it into this area over here, okay? Now, kind of bright, right? For sure. Alright, now I'm going to take some of that yellow into my blue so that, you know, where that yellow-green overlaps blue, it's kind of, it looks like a kind of a neutral medium tone green. Alright. Now, let's go with a green. This is a pale green. Blending that in as well. So see, it's just like the process of adding blue, you know. I started light and worked darker. I do the same thing like this, you know, with some additional tones. Anytime you change hue, start light and work darker, you know, incrementally, if you can, if you have the colors. If you have to jump from a really light tone to a darker tone, you know, to a fairly dark tone. Let's say on this one, I don't have a, you know, a pale green or something like that. You can use like yellow or something like that and go over blue, and that'll look like green because it'll kind of, optically, it'll kind of mix. Okay, that is kind of a yellow, oh, that's light green, it's called, okay? So that, I know that looks bizarre right now, because it's a heavy, very bright saturation of a isolated green, alright? So, what I'm going to do now is I'll bring in the kind of magenta, and then we're going to bring them together, hopefully. Let me see here. Okay, I had a little bit of pink on this tip, so I'm just going to use this tip, okay? Now, when I'm thinking about like a pink, magenta type of thing, I'm going to start off with some like light pinks, and I'll work into kind of a violet like this. Light, medium, darker. Well, this is light, medium, another medium. I mean, if I go with a really dark violet, it'll look quite different. Okay, bringing this in. I'm going to keep most of this pink and purple away from the green, okay? Because pink overlapping green is not going to be, not going to lead to anything good. Now, if you watch my last video where I kind of add pink into the sky, you know, I'm talking about kind of introducing an extra color, you know, to extend the color scheme of a scene. You can see what this one is doing right here. It's just adding pink, but where I overlap the purple, I mean the blue, it looks purple, okay? Because pink and blue form purple. I like to say, I was gonna say mix, but I'm not actually mixing. It's just kind of I'm running a clear pink over the top of blue. You know, they're probably, this isn't wet enough to where it's actually like physically mixing, you know, with the color underneath. So it's just kind of like an overlay. It's like a transparent overlay. Okay, that is the pink. That was a rosemary. Okay, this one's orchid. You have like a light purple. That's what this one is. Actually, it's a little bit brighter than I thought it would be. It looks like a pretty bright pink. Yeah, I think it looks pretty good. Adding some of it to my blue area, like that, going into that. Trying to go and create variation. You see this, you know, where that purple overlaps blue, you really don't, you know, it doesn't look too different, you know, but it just looks darker. But it doesn't necessarily look purple in those blue areas. Again, it's because I already had the blue laid down. Okay. This is a pale violet. Pale violet over blue, just kind of looks like a darker violet, right? Or darker blue, one of the two. Okay, going down on my horizon with it a little bit. Let's try some magenta and violet, okay? I don't know what the human eye can pick up as far as like colors go when one would see this, but sometimes film, you know, the camera and film these days, maybe digital, the sensor can probably pick up some other colors. And remember, a lot of these things are taken with under a time, you know, exposure, so it registers a lot of other colors that you might not be able to see or as intensely, but I don't know what it would look like in person because I haven't seen it in person, but I do want to. Okay, kind of making the area around this area a little bit darker. Right? Now, if I was doing this on a much smaller card, you know, piece of paper, this would, I'd already be done a long time ago with this guy, but there's just a lot more coverage here. And I'm not complaining because this is a ton of fun. It's almost like kind of painting, you know, in a way. In terms of adding this ink in these layers. I'm working on black now, okay? And adding this black should hopefully kind of make the colors pop out a little bit more. I mean, I can see the kind of the quality of my... I'm gonna switch this tip around. The quality of the like stroke too, like this. What I'm doing is I'm doing this type of thing. So I'm hopefully getting a little bit of that kind of tapered, you know, edge right there. Okay. I've had a lot of customers in the past tell me they've, you know, they get these where they live. And that would be really neat, I think. Okay, I'm kind of adding this right down around this mountain. I really do need to go in and kind of color in the mountain here. Looks like kind of flames, colored flames coming out of there. There's a lot of motion up there. Every time you start with the black, kind of, you know, get a little bit off on the kind of the perimeter. That, then kind of drag it in. It's a really dark tone, you know, of course. It's a dark valley. You want it really dark, but at this point in time, my page is really wet in the two corners, so it's not laying down very much color at any given time. I kind of have to tap it like this to build up more of that black on there. But I am able to kind of work it around a little bit. Being that it is so wet, it's not setting up, in other words, so I'm kind of able to manipulate that ink as it sits up there. It almost looks like an alcohol ink that you're kind of spreading around or something. Which can be fun as far as different textures go. I don't know how this looks on the camera, but in person it seems like it's getting more dramatic to me. I can do this forever. This is, as far as like, I like putting in a lot of detail in my scenes, but I also like doing this type of thing right here. I just like I love building this up like this and watching what's kind of happening, right before my eyes. It's just, it's kind of neat. Alright, I'll try to expedite this along, or bring this along here. Let's go for a little bit of a build up in the corners right here, just to bring in some extra value in terms of darkness out there. Okay. See that right there? So it's kind of vibrating there in terms of color. Alright, now I need to switch back to kind of a lighter tip here. Or a pure tip, because I need to really get into that mountain image now. I don't know if I'm done up there. Maybe a little bit more of the green, I think. That's a little bit too bright for me. But let's go to that mountain below. Tell you what, I haven't used this London fog in a few weeks. This is a gray. Let's try some of that on my mountain. I do have some of the colors from, the Aurora Borealis in my mountain there, but that's not going to be a problem because, the colors of the, the color lighting should be on the mountain anyway, Some of that color should be reflecting off of the elements within the scene. This is what I like to do too, like on some of these kind of ridges right in here. I like to leave them a little bit lighter. Okay, so this is kind of colored in right here, colored in right here. Maybe in the back of this one. So it just looks a little bit more dimensional. It looks like this ridge is kind of standing out. I mean, you can pick and choose any of, those areas within a given stamp, and, you can make certain areas kind of stand out more than others, like that. Okay. Let's go with blue tones again. Okay. This is the Salvia Blue. Again, that previous one was the London Fog. Okay. See this ridge right here? Again, I'm putting a little tone behind it, which will hopefully pop out that foreground ridge. Maybe as far as the summit goes, right next to the light, I'll kind of darken that peak at the summit, just so it kind of, the background light stands out more against it. Okay, and down here, let's bring in some tone. Okay, that was the Salvia Blue. Here's a light blue. Okay, this light blue it's a pretty decent jump in value from, the lightest blues that I happen to have. Okay, let's add a little tone behind that one. You can really see this kind of peak sticking out closer to us now. The darker we go. See some of those little peaks kind of stand out, like so. I tell you what, over here I said I'll probably add in some other tones. I'm on a blue right now that I think will work on this. I'm just laying the blue right over that yellowish kind of green, and that kind of makes that yellow seem a darker green because I have blue on top of it. Okay. All right, let's get into our darker blues. Let's go back to that kind of navy blue tone. Okay, just like above, when you get into your darker tones, kind of be a little bit more careful, just so you don't tone out all of your kind of lit areas, okay? You want to kind of retain some of those just for some contrast and your value scheme, you know, having some areas light, some areas darker. It's kind of lighting retention, just don't tone everything out. Okay. Okay, kind of working in some of my shadows on the mountain. Where do you put the shadows? Just look at the image, and where there are areas that are kind of darker in the design, just go in and reiterate those shadows with additional ink. Okay? You can take your cues from that. Just look at the image, okay? Really observe it and say, okay, this area on the design is darker, and that can give you kind of a good head start. It doesn't mean you have to stick with the image and the kind of the inherent shading on the design, but it's a good place to start as far as adding some tone down. Okay, now I have a lot of tone on that mountain right now. Let's go in and bring black, okay, into it. Just like we did with the sky, I'll do the same thing with my object. I'm going to kind of cap off the bottom of this a little bit with some additional tone. Kind of put on a nice little vignette effect. Darker perimeter. Alright, I'll have some of this black coming up into this mountain. Again, I don't want a bunch of big oval shapes or something like that. But I might want some shading using this given value. In this case, it's black. It's not getting real black right now because the page, again, it's really wet with ink, so it's allowing me to add it in a much more gradual fashion, which again means I might have a little bit more control over it in terms of how much ink is laid down at any given time. Kind of the slower that goes, the more control you have. Alright, so mountain there, you can see what I meant, you know, as far as the shading went. Okay. Alright, now here's one of the things I've been wanting to work with, and that's the Prussian Blue. Prussian Blue really penetrates the paper quickly, okay? For some reason, it's really dark, almost black blue, but for some reason it's very thin. Marvy inks in general are a little bit thinner than a lot of other brands of inks, and of all the inks within the Marvy brand, Prussian has a different feel to me as far as how it kind of applies to the paper. Let me see, I did it all on this side right here. I don't know if you can see it. See how bright that is? And that's, you know, the difference from here to there. Now there might be, I don't know, like some characteristics with a lot of different inks from a lot of different companies, like maybe out of a certain range of inks or a line of inks, you know, they might be kind of similar in terms of, I don't know, viscosity or whatever. But, I don't know, maybe the chemistry is probably, that's the only thing I can think of. The chemistry is a little bit different with Prussian Blue for some reason than from the other Marvy inks. Maybe just in order to achieve that hue, maybe it's just, I don't know, it's got a different ingredient or something. I don't know. Not really quite sure, but that's always been the case. So that kind of texture up there, it's because I've kind of dragged like that. Or I've dragged like this, I should say, okay? That's why it almost feels, in some ways, when you get this color built up, kind of like alcohol inks in some ways. You know how alcohol inks, you can kind of move around a little bit, especially with like a blender. Probably the most painting-like scene I've done in a while. Just in terms of the brush strokes of this, it really, and that image really kind of lends itself to doing that. And I mean, the size of this card, it's just, you know, it's big. For sure. It's a large surface to do. All right. Wow. That is crazy. let me try something here. This is a dark green. It's just number, it's number 4. It's just called green from Marvy. I want to give some variation to this green part over here. I take some ink off and then come into it like so. All right, a little bit better. Okay. I just lost my Prussian blue again. And then coming back over with the Prussian, just to kind of blend that in a little bit. Alright, that is pretty insane in terms of what's going up in that sky. I think I used more ink on that top area than I have on other scenes in quite some time, but that is really fun. I mean, we've come a long way from, that initial Aurora Borealis, right? Okay, this is where the embellishments, will really, really pay off, okay? I love my white gel pens, and let's look back at this book here. Okay, let's look at some of the imagery in here. Okay. In terms of the photos, okay, we can see these little stars in here. After all, this is nighttime photography. So you can see those little stars up there. So remember, these are all kind of time exposure, night shots. But you can see these little stars up here, but those little stars in there really give it a lot of texture. This one here, you can see this was a really long time exposure because those stars are kind of tracking a little bit, with the rotation of the Earth. Anyways, let me see if you can see this here. Okay. Little stars up there. That's what we're going to do. Oh, here's that color scheme. Mine's brighter. And right here. I like some of these. They have that reddish tinge around some of them, like that. Here, this is Orion right here. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll add, specific constellation to this scene if I can. I did that one time in a catalog of mine. I had these kind of nighttime things going on. The catalog's not out anymore, but I added these actual constellations to some of the scenes just to see if anyone would kind of recognize that and say something. No one ever did. Not that they didn't see it, but if anyone saw it, I'm unaware. Okay, I'm going with a little bit more black. That Prussian blue kind of took away some of that black. Not in a bad way, though. It just You know, the Prussian blue, if I'm overlapping it now with black, the Prussian blue will make this black seem much more rich, you know, in terms of having a little bit of a tinge of a hue to it, okay? But I want these stars to be really interesting and kind of standing out, so I'm going to put a little bit more black over the top. Kind of frames it off nicely. All right. Let's take a look here. Let's go for trying to see where I can maybe have a little bit of a kind of maybe a somewhat recognizable constellation in here. I mean, this isn't exactly right, but it'd be kind of a Orion. All right, now I'm just kind of winging it. Okay, so we have some nice textures going on in the scene. Okay. All right, now this white pen can also, I've left it, you know, these little ridge lines a little bit lighter to begin with, right? But I'm just going and, see, I'm kind of reiterating that. They have a little bit of tone in some areas. And that's where I'm going to put some additional white gel. Maybe, you know, I mean, it can represent a lot of things. It can represent, you know, just where the ridge line is kind of illuminated, right? And that could just be because light is hitting it, but it can also mean that maybe there's some snow on that area, and snow is very reflective in terms of the light that's hitting it. Okay. Now I'm not going to illuminate an area that's kind of dark because I wouldn't have such a strong highlight in those areas, okay? So I'm kind of hitting the areas that are already a little bit light. Here, you know? Areas that I've retained a little bit of that. You know, lighter, non-inked surface. Okay. All right. Here we go. Okay, now where I've added some of that additional highlighting in here, in the same spirit of highlighting, we can also go back in and add a little bit of shading. And like I said, you can kind of go off of some of the shapes and shading that are already on the design. So if I see some areas, now this isn't the one, but this is the other mountain rocky peaks, but you can see where some of it has already been shaded, right, to define the forms on the image itself. This is the tall peak here, but see what I'm doing is I'm just going into those areas and I'm just kind of reiterating what's on the stamp. And what I like to do is I like to just go a little bit darker than the color, you know, that the that object has kind of become. So if this is a much lighter mountain, I might not use, you know, that dark of a, you know, a color. I might go with a lighter one. But see, but the thing is, what I'm getting at is I'll work from light to dark. You know, I can add darker tones still, you know, after I do this. But I like to kind of work up to them. And then, again, that way I tend to not get kind of undesirable marks or something like that. You know, I don't run into surprises, something like, oh my gosh, that, you know, that looks horrific, you know, or something like that. You know, because everything's kind of coming into focus nice and slowly and gradually, because I work through the lighter tones first to see if I kind of like something. And if I like it, then I just keep adding to it. As opposed to kind of like a brush calligraphy type of spirit where, you know what I mean? You're going for that, the movement and gesture of you know, a mark. And when it's down, it's down. Okay, now this is a little bit of a lighter blue like that, okay? And I'm going in and I'm blending out some of those darker marks that I just laid in there. So sometimes that helps in terms of the kind of the blending process, you know, of the colors that you've laid down. They can look more kind of smooth, going dark and then blending it out, okay? And that being said, if I do add some tones, using some darker tones, because these are alcohol-based markers, on glossy cardstock, I go in with a blending tool or just a lighter version of it and take it right out. As far as the process goes too, like if I don't like any of those stars, or if I've added too many, what I can do is I can just take, you know, a paper towel or maybe even my finger, and I can kind of rub it right out and it'll come off. Okay. Now the one thing you can't do, you can't kind of rub off like dye-based inks. It's getting kind of, layered and saturated into the paper, but things that were laying down on top, there's certain things you can do to remove something that you might not have wanted to. So again, as far as a process goes, it's nice and user-friendly, you might say, because let's say if I add this down there and I don't like it, I just buff it right on out, okay? And it's removed. But if I let it dry, it still allows me to just buff it right out if I don't like it. What fixes this down, though, we don't want a real fragile surface, where you send a card to someone and they pick it up and it just wipes off, right? I spray seal everything, and that kind of contains the ink. Okay, we have a little bit of a kind of a glowing star there, because what I've done with a kind of a dry brushing touch, I've removed a lot of the pigment ink that I just put on here. This is a Color Box Frost White pigment ink, okay? And I'm just going into the scene and picking out, I'm picking out kind of some of the larger stars that I've added in there. And I'm just adding a little bit of ink over the top of it, dabbing gently. And again, my ink is kind of dry on here, and that's how I get that kind of glow. Working there, see that one? These ones are crisp, so we have a nice glowing star. And some of the stars are more, just a crisp little dot. Okay, if I want a little bit of mist on, or illuminated light, let's say wherever this is. It's not Mount Everest, but it can be like wind up there, kind of whipping around some of that snow. Maybe some of the snow is being illuminated or whatnot, I don't know. I can put some of this texture on those areas like that. See that right there? There. This is what it looks like from a distance. That. Little subtle details, okay? I'll put a little bit of a tone around those stars on Orion's belt just to, I don't know, kind of make them a little bit bigger. Okay, so maybe for a little subtle touch, we have this kind of green area out here, and I have these Sharpie paint pens in the form of some pastel tones. Maybe I'll put a green star, or stars, in with that kind of greenish area. This little subtle detail. The green doesn't stand out as much as the white because there's not as much contrast. And I think this will be maybe the first time I've done it. This purple or lavender. Maybe I can add a lavender star. A lot of times I use this for wildflowers or something, but going into this area right in here, I'm kind of going over the areas that are just a little bit darker than the lavender. So I don't want it to stand out too much. I just want it to be one of those little subtle details that someone might discover upon kind of more careful inspection. And of course there's pink in here too, so I can do that too. I can add some of these pink little stars or highlights. All right. This scene has definitely taken me on a kind of a more extended journey, you might call it, than what I was thinking about. I was thinking about just doing a really quick demonstration, but I liked where this process was going up here and getting darker and darker. I wasn't going to go that dark, but it was just too much fun, so I had to keep going with it. But anyways, the Aurora Borealis, this is a two-stamp scene here, in fact. But we have the Aurora Borealis curtains in here, and just going in here, blending in a lot of different tones. See how those stars did? It really brings out kind of depth in there, I think. Because suddenly, this Aurora Borealis in here, the curtains, visually, they're supposed to be closer to us. So I think that added some depth by adding those stars around like that. We have a little bit of variation down here in the mountain. I could put some of that little bit of tone down here, but I don't know if I really want to. I think it looks good just as is, and kind of differentiating the two areas, but you could. And anyways, retaining some of the light in here for those little peaky caps in here. This one wouldn't look bad if it was just silhouette too, and just coloring the whole thing black. I've seen some photos like that as well. But anyways, this was the first time I think that I've gone for that kind of that split tone. If you watch one of my videos, I did the split fountain color scheme, okay, where there's different tones, but it's not too much different than this. You know, we have a neutral color in between, which is blue, and then we've taken this into purples and greens, okay. But it's the exact same process as that split fountain. So if you see, you know, there might be different looks to a lot of the different cards that I do, but the techniques are really all the same. You know, it's just kind of applying them in a slightly different angle or configuration or whatnot, you know. And you can get, you know, really some quite different looks. People wouldn't, you know, kind of maybe not relate this to that split fountain scene, but it really is, in terms of how you kind of divide up your color schemes within a given area, if they're kind of unrelated, okay? Greens and pinks, you know what I mean? I wouldn't necessarily have them right next to each other, so you have that kind of neutral color in between like that, and that could be really fun. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed the scene. I really had fun doing it, and I really like the way it turned out, especially with that black out there. I'm looking at this through my camera screen now. But, I don't know, a lot of details. Even in that sky area, when I look at the finished piece like that, with all those little streaks up there, see how rich you can get those streaks in there like that? And that's just by, you know, playing around with your different tones of inks, you know, it's not even image, so a lot of variation in there. So just kind of work it from the lighter tones and then work darker, and that's how you get these nice, deep, rich saturations. Don't rush the method, okay? And you'll be rewarded, you know, from nice, glowing, rich surfaces in the end. Okay, thanks for watching. Hope you had a good time with I don't know. I'll think of a title later.